Good morning, traders. Welcome to Tuesday of this beautiful Thanksgiving week. Make sure to swing over to ssftg.com/brief to grab your morning brief levels. Before we jump on in, as always, make sure to check the news so that we know what's going on and when. That way we're not taken by surprise by anything. Looking at the news calendar here, we can see there is some earlier morning news at 8:55, but it's red book. That's minor. 9 o'clock housing price indexes, also minor news announcements there. We've got a medium news announcement with the S&P HPI composite, but the big news is going to be at 10 o'clock. That's a CB consumer confidence for November. The forecast is 98. The previous was 100.9. As we go into the afternoon session, we've got the Richmond manufacturing indexes, Texas service sector outlooks. Not really a whole lot. 11 o'clock has FOMC member Bullard speaking. 12 o'clock is FOMC member Williams speaking. And at 12:45, FOMC member Clarita speaking. At 1300, we have the 7-year note auctions. And then, of course, today's Tuesday. So that means that we've got the 1630 API weekly crude oil stocks to give us a heads up as far as the inventories for tomorrow. So that's going to take a look at what's going on for today. So now we can jump into some charts for today. That's Tuesday, 11/24 of 2020. First up on the list is, of course, old reliable, good old NASDAQ. Market's seeing a bit of sideways action, and the bottom edge of support down there at the 11,830s did hold really well. It was a little bit further up, and it kind of chopped through it initially, but as soon as it cut through, it immediately reversed right back up again. It was originally up a little bit further like this. So once the market made it back up above those 11,860s, we'll say, we've kind of created the secondary zone of interest that's obviously showing something, right? If we look historically, we can see that there's a nice bounce. We've got support. We've got resistance, support and resistance, support again, support. When we came back down, it was resistance, resistance, broke above, acted as support. So this 11,840 area is going to be a pretty big zone of interest if the market can pull back to it. At the moment for the NASDAQ, it seems like we're a little bit more range bound, and the highs of the range seem to fit pretty well around the 12,000s. What a shock, right? Would have never guessed that the high of a resistant range would have been a gigantic psychological level like 12,000. Who would have thought? So overall, it looks like we had a big move to the downside that failed pretty aggressively. And if we look at the overall volume down here, we can see that volume took a gigantic jump to the upside on that big push lower, suggesting that a lot of profit taking took place. And we can safely confirm profit taking and potentially new buyers given the response, right? The response was very bullish. So with the market moving as it is now, it seems like we've got that leg attempt to the upside, and bulls are trying to get a flag for another continuation up. We cycle below support, so the next objective is likely going to be resistance, so that does make sense. But at the moment, we're not really breaking up. We're just kind of showing support around these 11,950s or so. And as long as we're not making higher highs, higher lows, or anything like that, then we've got to still remain on the neutral to, well, mostly just neutral side until we can get a little bit more info. Once the market starts giving more info, though, then we can start shifting gears. There are a couple nice caveats to this. Obviously, some very nice stochastic divergence off the bottom, CCI divergence off the bottom, referencing this swing down. We have RSI divergence. Everything is showing that there is potential bullishness here. We just have to wait and see them show up now. Then over to the S&P, as per the usual, the S&P lately has been a little bit stronger, and we're seeing the same thing reflected today. Beautiful support down at the lows. The buyers couldn't even make it down to that support before churning back up, and now we've created this nice little bull channel. It's very weak. There's not much of an angle to the upside with this channel. So with the market breaking higher, that's fine. Maybe they're just trying to solidify a steeper angle, right? That might be totally okay. But if the bulls fail up here, if we get a pop up, especially around those 3620s, and then fail back down again, that could be a big attempt to rotate all the way back down to those 3550s instead. So if the buyers are going to make it up here, they're going to need to stick the landing, because if we look backward, there is a huge amount of support and resistance all inside here. This whole zone is a mess, and from historical price action, we're right on top of the low of that area. So if the buyers are going to hold it, which it's looking pretty good so far, then we should see a little bit more continuation to the upside. But if they're not going to hold it, be a little bit careful for that thing to go sliding back to the down. And then over on gold, we've got some nice gold movement back to the downside. And if you remember yesterday, we were talking about how that major level of support down here, if that breaks, there's just nothing left anymore. Well, guess what broke, right? There's not a whole lot left anymore, and the market is seeing some very aggressive residual selling pressure. not a big surprise. What would be really nice to see down here, even though the market is still plunging down, we're starting to show some signs of possible divergent lows, which doesn't by any means mean that it's going to stop this downward aggression. But what it does mean is that the best the buyers can start to hope for is a little bit more of a range. So if the market wants to go a bit more range bound, a little bit more sideways, then potentially looking to fade the highs until the buyers eventually at some point break out and invalidate the sellers, then we can shift gears to the long side, right? But at the moment, the sellers are still in control. We're overshooting the bottom of the bear channel, so it is massively overextended. But we've got to see the bulls come back in and push it back above the channel highs, above the previous swing. I mean, at this point, even get back into the Keltner, something, right? It's just so far down here that it needs a bit more of a bounce to add to that proof. So sellers will continue looking to short until they're invalidated, and then they'll still look to get out at break even on a flush before reversing long. Then over on crude oil, we have some very good bullish angular momentum going on here with this ascending wedge grinding its way up. And with this ascending wedge, the big part here is what it's breaking above. Remember that big giant zone of resistance at around those 43s? Well, we're trying to break above that right now. And it doesn't mean that they're going to be successful because there's still a lot of resistance here, right? There's still a ton of resistance up here. But if they're able to carry it through, then we may see some very good continuation momentum up towards the 44s before seeing some type of pullback. The problem, obviously, is that we are deep in sell territory. We're above the highs. We're seeing a lot of profit taking coming off with the volume increasing at the highs. That would suggest that there's a lot of sell orders coming in, whether it's buyers taking profit or sellers coming in for new shorts. Whatever the case may be, there are orders hitting up at these highs, and that's giving a clue that, you know, although the bulls are trying to break above this resistance zone at 43, 46, you'll notice I left it red because we haven't really proved it yet, right? I mean, it made what, like a wick above the highs? Who cares? It needs a bit more than this. And even if it does, then we've got an ascending wedge that's breaking higher. That's overextensive. There's just it's too high. That's really what it comes down to, is that crude oil is just too far up to want to be a buyer up here. We need to see a bit of a pullback, get a little bit of a flush back down through the 43s, maybe even retest the 43s, come back as support, or better yet, dip down to the low 42s. Then we can find some support to push back up. Where it is now, it really just leaves room for scalpers, and that's about it. Then on the euro, for the currency side of things, we're seeing a bit of a range constriction. Yesterday we were looking at more of a flat range. Now we're seeing it kind of constrict a little bit. It did try to widen out at the highs, an attempt of a breakout, and that breakout completely failed and rolled back over. When it rolled back over, it came down to, hey, what a surprise, rising support, lows of the range, broke back higher. And you can see right through here, this is where the sellers tried to take it down. And right there is where those sellers gave up. Now, the fact that the sellers gave up on that breakout move to the upside, we still held the inside resistance. But where we're coming back to is that point of interest where those sellers will have given up, and they may be looking to reverse, get out at break even, and that creates sort of this artificial rising support hovering around that 1.186 or so to see if they can get a little bit more. So realistically, what the sellers are going to be looking for is a pushback down here and another hold, right? See more resistance coming in off that high and pressure it back down, and then they might have something to go down towards those lows. If the buyers are able to break back up again, even if they get back up to a double top, which will probably find some resistance, if they can hold some support off of the retest, then they're off to the races with that support to rally the market back up towards highs, maybe even back up to that big 1.2. And then good old Bitcoin on the cryptocurrency side of things had a beautiful trap on the lows with a gargantuan volume flush, which would very, very likely indicate buyers absorbed, especially given the response. Look where it came off of, right? It came off of S1, it came off the lows of the channel, it came off of the possibility of a 3-press low. We had divergence the whole way down there, right? Everything on the planet is screaming that buyers should be coming in at the lows here. They did dunk a little bit lower, but once they start holding that inside, that's a big clue. Now it's all the way back up towards those 19,300s. So where we're pushing into at the moment, we're not back to the channel highs, right? We haven't made it back to the channel highs. And realistically, we could even narrow this a little bit further. Something like, I gotta shorten that up a little bit. We could shorten it up a little bit more to like this. and that would give us a bit more of a channel. Either way, I mean, all of those levels are responsive, so it doesn't really matter which one we use. The important part, really what it comes down to, is it hasn't made it there yet. And a lot of times when it hasn't made it there yet and we've only had 2 pulses to the upside, it will probably get a third. So longs are still looking on the pullback to get that continuation leg to the upside and kind of finish that job off to the top of the channel. Maybe even blow off to those all-time highs. I know we've been talking about it this week and a little bit last week. We're not that far anymore. 19,214 where it is now. I mean, that's only a couple $100. And considering that so far it's already rallied about 1,000, a couple hundred more isn't going to be that big of a deal for Bitcoin at this point. So all-time highs going into Thanksgiving. Ooh, man, it might be a Black Friday after all. Just have to shop online, that's all. Alrighty, well that's going to do it for today. Stay safe out there. Like we always say, keep those stops in play and let those winners run. Hopefully you have a fantastic day of trading if you're going to be trading today. And if you're not and you're just looking at this for some fun, rest up. I hope you're having a fantastic Thanksgiving weekend off. And if you are trading today, like I said, be careful. Otherwise, though, enjoy the day. Hopefully you have a great one, and we will see you all tomorrow. Thanks.